This week on the OneCast, we're going to talk about how to get somebody involved in fishing, some of our favorite fishing memories, and just general experiences we enjoyed on the water.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, God, it's a toad, son. It's a toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's going to be a bad day.
What's going on, fans of the OneCast? Stole it from you, Pete.
I don't like. We got to come up with a name for our people.
All right, yes,
like the casters or something.
Yeah,
like what's going on, casters?
I think it's always hard to get that first like intro sentence out. You know what I mean? Like we don't script any of this stuff just for you guys, just so you know. But it's just hard sometimes. You get tongue twisted on trying to figure out the words that you need to bring out of your mouth to make this show awesome. But head on over to onecastfishing.com. Use the code the OneCast. Save some money at checkout. Get yourself some of those goodies. Some of those soft plastics that Ben just restocked. Some of those snagless jigs. Some of those weedless net heads. Some of those long neck hooks that have been crushing them on Carolina rigs. Not going to lie, I lost a couple hooks because I tied pretty poor knots the other day. But head on over to onecastfishing.com. Use the code the OneCast and get yourself some savings on that. Also, Pete, did you want to bring up anything on upcoming friends?
Upcoming friends? You
No.
mean like partnerships? No.
Yeah.
Not yet. You're going to have to wait.
If you're watching the YouTube version, then check out our hats and see the logo on there, and that might give you a little clue.
Yeah. Don't zoom in too far though.
No. So September 1st, we're going to announce a partnership. We've been putting some teasers on Instagram, floating some stuff around. It's something you've seen us use or wear or throw or fish with on the show, on YouTube videos. We've talked about it before. So make sure you keep tuned, stay tuned for that. Make sure you check out For His Glory Outdoors. Great tournament coming up. I'm going to get him on one of our lives here in the next couple weeks. FX3Inc.org, Heroes Harvest, Special Operations, Bass Anglers, all of those organizations to help support those that have fought for our country and continue to be ready if called upon. So, make sure you check them out. And it's been, I don't know how you have been. Trey's been on some fish.
I have not been on the water. Too busy doing the business stuff and some issues there I don't want to get into. But, in the teaser, you mentioned about bringing folks fishing.
Mm-hmm.
But before we get in that, and if you had something else to say, but it gives you a chance to think about the answer, I want to ask you guys, why do you all love bass fishing? What is it about the sport that is our passion? And the reason why we have this podcast where we sit around and run our sucks talking about little green fish that swim in the water.
Yeah. Hey, so for everyone, running your suck is just running your mouth. It's a very heavy military term. And that's a great question. And hey, listen, everyone, obviously we want to know why you love bass fishing. And we also need you to do us a favor and leave us a review on anything that you're listening to. It's not like Spotify, Apple, all that stuff. Leave us a review and share this with your friends. It really helps us grow the show. But kind of, and let us know why you like bass fishing. Man, that's a great question. And I think every single person probably has a different, I think a lot of the answers are similar.
Yeah.
But maybe how people got into bass fishing is very different. So I'll just tell you, like, bass fishing to me, the reason why I love it so much is it's challenging. It consistently challenges your decision-making process. But that's not like, I didn't get into bass fishing or fishing in general because it was so challenging.
You're right, because that's a lot of the reason why I love it. Because to me, it's four-dimensional chess in a way, because we're out there chasing these little green fish that have small brains that pretty much should operate on instinct. And we think we had developed patterns over the years and how they should operate. But we all know you go out there one day and you go to the very next spot the next day under the same conditions, and they're not there.
Yep.
You are competing against nature. So all the elements out there, you're competing against these living creatures that can do whatever they want. And they can do things that
don't make any sense,
or maybe it does make sense to them. We just don't know that yet because, with forward facing sonar, we're learning so much more about bass behavior. But you have all those elements in there. There's so many variables involved. And anglers, we talk color, right, on our lures. Like maybe it makes an impact, maybe it doesn't. And I did, right, you can go down that rabbit hole. Now there's just so many variables involved that you're trying to put this puzzle together to just put 5 decent fish in the boat and hopefully do so well. And then if you're a tournament fisherman on top of that, not only are you competing against the elements, nature of these fish, but you also have to do it at a better level than everyone else on the water with you.
Yeah. I just think it's one of those sports or one of those recreational activities that it can just like, if you do it right and you're ethical and moral about it, like it can make you a better person. I feel like it can, right? Like for me, I know and what I do for a living and even the family background I come from, like I got started in the outdoors with my family. They were very outdoorsy, but I wasn't really into bass fishing. Yeah. It was like multi-species. I think I talked about it on multiple shows ago. But the bass part of it, man, I didn't really get into it until like the last 7 years or so. And I got into it on a just a whim, man, just signing up for a random like Warriors on the Water tournament. And for some odd reason, like something stuck in my head and I was like, this is the coolest thing that I've done besides like jumping out of an airplane or whatever the case may be. Like it does stimulate an adrenaline rush that I don't know if I'm able to explain it, but for me, it satisfies me. And you're right. Like it's just a constant, never ending puzzle. Like you're never gonna solve it, dude.
And that reward you have when you solve it and you do really well, you catch a monster fish. Years ago, probably like 2016 or 17, Rick Klein caught a massive fish in a tournament, and like his hands were shaking. He's like, when my hands stop shaking, that's when I'll quit fishing. Yeah, and that's just kind of how it is. Like you get that feeling that, you pull a big one in the boat, you're like everyone's stoked, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of what like the outside demeanor is, right? There's folks out there who are super calm and all, but that's the reward you get, and it's absolutely right. That's why we all love it. I don't know, Pete, you've been pretty quiet.
So I think for me, like what got me hooked at a young age was it was a bunch of people like I was watching on TV doing something that I could relate to, and it's become we know it's not about money now. It's not necessarily a rich man's sport, but it makes it a lot easier if you have funds. Yeah. It wasn't always like that. And, growing up watching when it was the 150s and even before that, whatever the elite series was back then, you just, those guys reminded you of folks that you hung, like they remind me of the guys that were in my dad's garage drinking beer over the weekend. Like, and the other thing that drew me, like I outside of work, cause I have a job that you have to be very conformist to, and you have to follow rules pretty strict, but like, I don't like rules. I don't like being told a certain way. And I don't mean like tournament rules, but with bass, like there's no right or wrong way to go out and catch a fish is what I'm getting at. Yeah. Like you can put your own twists on things. And that's how all these different techniques and all this stuff comes out.
Matty Wong was talking about last.
Yeah. If you listen to last week's episode, like you can do the same thing completely different and it worked for you. You can change baits. You can do anything, think about the guys that decided to stick toothpicks in the tail of a worm to make it float. Now everybody knows that trick. And if you didn't, that's a great trick if you want to make your tail float. Like for me, learning, guys figured out to squeeze salt out of a Cinco to change the fall rate so you can make the tail float different. All of those things in different ways you can change baits and using markers. And now we have markers specifically for it. But I remember carrying Sharpies around to add a little bit of color here or there. And I see those arguments all the time. You brought up earlier about color, like, doesn't matter. And I know there's days where it's one color and that's the only thing that
we can get it. Like, it doesn't matter till it matters. And
it doesn't matter till it matters. Yeah.
It's one of the, right. And it's one of those things I think I've talked about before. Like there's so many variables, right? And as fishermen, as humans, like you change something and it works, or like, oh, that's the solution. Maybe not. There's so many other variables involved. One thing I did want to mention though is that, and Pete, this is a good point. You brought it up, is that on the competitive tournament side, like it's become very expensive. But this sport, this hobby, doesn't have to be that. Like,
not at all.
There are still plenty of folks out there who are just doing it for pure fun and enjoyment and escape, right? In the veteran community, There's a lot of folks who have gotten to fishing because it was a release and it helped with PTSD, just being in nature and connecting that way.
And we've talked about numbers before, like 50 million anglers, and 1% of those are your tournament.
That's right.
Like bass fishermen. So most people are just out there doing it for fun, and they just want to get into it. And you see it on groups all the time on what I hate more than anything is social media, because of the way people treat each other on there. But you'll see a guy like, my kid wants to get into fishing. What should I do? And they're like, I'll pick a cheaper sport. And it's like, DM that guy. I'm like, man, go to Walmart and buy the Shakespeare start fishing kit that's got some Senkos and some hooks in it, and it comes with a cheap little rod, and just go to a pond, buy your license, because they will hammer you. But like, just go to a pond and start fishing, or buy some night crawlers and some hooks and a bobber, and go soak them and just figure it out. And if you want to get more, like, the good thing about social media is there's so much information out there now that you can gather, that you can learn, from other people's mistakes and lessons they've learned. But like you said, it's not, you don't have to have a ton of money to just go out and fish. You always hear fishing so expensive. It's really not, if you just want to go fish.
I mean, a cane pole will catch a bass.
Yeah.
I mean,
Fishing,
or any fish. Yeah.
Fishing, expensive is well, obviously it's relative, but fishing is only expensive if you're trying to be like the person you're following on social media, or you're trying to, there are stepping stones to progressing in anything that you want to do.
Yeah.
And we want to, so like, kind of the theme of this is like, how do you get people into the outdoors? How do you get people fishing and stuff like that? And talking about some of our memories and stuff, but you literally just have to just go do it. Like, if there was anything,
just invite somebody, man.
If you know how to do it, invite somebody to go do it. Or like, if you don't know how to do it, then just go try it out, because you don't have to tie a Palomar knot. You don't have to tie an improved clinch knot. You don't even have to use a fishing pole. You can use a water bottle, right? I mean, there are literally, and listen, please go back to our last episode and listen to Matty Wong, which is only part 1, but he kind of breaks that down like somebody who comes from the islands and progressed all his way to the Bassmaster Elites. But like, unlocking your imagination and creativity is really going to make you, it's gonna bring the whole world forward, man, in a fishing world. And I think a lot of times, we, like on social media, it's not the 50 million recreational anglers that get involved on social media. I think it's the 1% tournament anglers that get involved on social media, and they make a lot of those comments.
It's definitely a lot of just recreational guys too. Like, it's everybody on social media thinks they know everything, and they just want to be ignorant.
I wouldn't say that. I think
it's not just
people
anglers. It's just people.
You catch a big fish, you want to post that picture. I mean, go down the road here, right? The little Try Bait tackle shop. What's on the wall up there?
A bunch of pictures.
From like the 80s, right? Of these massive bass.
Yeah.
People want to, share that success. And,
that's right.
Social media, a lot of people are just doing it because they push the.
I think what Trey was saying, that it's the tournament guys that are ugly on there, and it's definitely not just tournament guys. I know plenty of people that act like jerks that have never fished a tournament in their life and never will. It's an opportunity for you to act like you know what you're talking about, even if you don't, and be flex on the internet. But we're not going to go to the negative. So for me, like, just take somebody fishing. Like, just invite your kids, friends, or if you got a buddy at work that you talk to all the time, and you're always talking about fishing on the weekend, say, hey man, why don't you come out with me? Like, take them out on the water, to the pond, or wherever it is that you go, and just introduce somebody to the sport. And they may hate it, but they might fall in love. And then now you've got somebody you fish with, if you don't have, a close group of friends or people that you do fish with, or that gives them an opportunity now to maybe get their kid involved. And, it's a cascade effect when you get people involved. If they fall in love with it, then they're going to get other people involved, and we can keep the sport growing and keep it evolving. And just think, if everybody that's listening to this, somebody got them started, whether it was their parent, whether it was a YouTube video through COVID. I mean, a lot of people started fishing because they were watching YouTube through COVID, and a video popped up and they clicked on it, and they were like, man, that dude's fishing in the HOA pond. I got one of those. And then they go to Walmart and buy an ugly stick, and they're out there throwing a Senko around, and now they've got $5,000 kayaks, and they're all over the place.
It definitely hooks you, right?
Exactly. When I think about my story, like my fishing story, you went fish, because I'm a little bit like you, Trey. I didn't really get into the bass fishing hardcore till 2013, 14 after I got in the Army. And I'll talk about that in a second. But, I remember as a child, one of my first fishing memories, I remember after church on Sunday, my dad was in the Marine Corps, so we didn't get to go fishing a whole lot. And he was a recruiter in Arkansas. And it was after church on Sunday, and we decided to go fishing. I was probably, I don't know, 6, 7. And we got in a 73 Dodge Charger. And I remember pulling out of the driveway, and my sister, who's a couple years younger, was just looking out the window, looking so sad because we were going on the fishing trip. She never got the fishing bug. She never got hooked, but maybe she should have went. Maybe she would have been.
That's right.
But we went over to Lake Norfolk, which is by Mountain Home where he worked at, which is still odd to me because we lived in Flippin. We were close to Bull Shoals, but I guess there was a good bank fishing spot because we didn't have a boat or anything. And we ended up catching 3 fish total, and I caught 2. My dad caught 1, and ever since then, I've been a way better fisherman than him. Don't talk about hunting; that's a different story. But I remember that was little. I loved it. There was a couple summers, and I went back to Missouri. I would use my uncle's pontoon boat and stuff. But it was really like 2013 or 14. I was like, I just want to go fishing, but I want a boat. I want to be able to move around and do all this. And so it was like most expensive date ever. I was back on leave in Missouri, went up to Bass Pro. I was like, I want that Bass Tracker, and paid for it, and picked it up like the next day or the day after. And then it's been.
And then you were a professional angler.
Exactly. No, right. I spent a couple of years. I didn't even know how to use a trolling motor at first. It took me forever to figure out how to use a trolling motor. I mean, that's kind of embarrassing to admit because I didn't realize there was a little triangle on top of it that tells which direction you're going. I'm like, why is this thing going in circles?
So, going back to your initial fishing trip with your dad, fishing off the bank, you probably had 2 spinning rods?
They might have been Zebcos.
Or 2 closed face rods.
To be honest, it might have been one like the Zebcos of my grandfather's from like the 1960s.
And then what were you using? Just a cork and some crickets or worms? Or
I don't remember what I was using. He was using like a very small grasshopper topwater.
Okay. So
very,
artificials.
very small. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I might have been using worms or something. I don't know. And that wasn't the first time fishing, right? We've done bluegill fishing, catfishing, and that's usually what we did more of growing up was catfishing from the bank and all. But yeah.
But that was the first memory, but of many memories, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like plenty of days, plenty of afternoons, whatever the case may be, spending with your dad, probably your dad's friends and stuff like that, fishing, whatever the case may be. Memories that you make that are absolutely priceless.
Yeah.
You can't put a price tag. You can put a price tag on some cheap monofilament probably at the time with a cheap closed face rod, with a cheap topwater lure, and that's all you needed, right? Hopefully you had a fishing license, your dad or whatever, but still, like at the end of the day, like it costs less than to fill your truck up with gas right now. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, but yeah, man, I mean, like that's how you got into fishing. Your dad just taking you to the bank and getting you hooked
that
up,
was
right?
the first introduction, and again, went a few times over the years, and I got more when I was spending summers back in Missouri using my uncle's pontoon boat. Like they didn't have a trolling motor and stuff, and catching topwater bass in the summertime.
Yeah.
But and I think the great thing about this sport and hobby is that bug can hit you at any time.
Mm-hmm.
Like mine was like, I just want to start doing this, but I want to be able to go where I want to go and really dive into it. And I was probably 23 at the time. Yeah. Still young, but I didn't have I could probably count the number of times on my hand we actually went bass fishing growing up.
Yeah. Pete, what about you, man? If you can remember, because I know you grew up in a all fishing family, but if you can remember that one memory that got you into it, what would it be?
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up fishing, like it was just what we did. But it was everything, I don't have a lot of early memories, but I know like from pictures, catching bluegill and stuff on a bobber. My dad, I never owned a push button reel. My dad, from the time I started fishing with him, forced me to learn how to throw a regular open faced Mitchell 300. We had a pile of them. Best reels ever made were the old Mitchells. So, that's what I started on. And the first, I would say when I got hooked on bass fishing, and the first bass I really remember catching, I was probably 5. And we owned some family property on a little a little private pond. It's like a 13-acre pond. And we were up there in the spring doing some work. And there was probably about a 4 or 5 pound female on a bed. And my dad seen it and he goes, come on with me. And I remember he had a Texas rigged tequila sunrise curly tail worm. And he flipped that joker out there and that fish ate and he set the hook. And I'm probably looking at butterflies and stuff. And he goes, hey, I think I got one, and hands me the rod. And I remember reeling that thing in and just running around showing everybody this big old, this big old largemouth. And there was this whole nother story, but the lady that lived next door to our property was actually a concentration camp survivor.
Wow.
And I remember she was out there watching on the porch and she's yelling, "Oh, PETA, you catch me a big one." And she's yelling down with her accent. That was a terrible accent, but, and so like, then I had it. So then every weekend I'm like, Dad, let's go. We called it the lake. I'm like, let's go to the lake. Can we go to the lake and go fishing? And from then on out, I remember like, it was just what we did. Like when we had free time, we went fishing, in the winters in the north, you don't fish a whole lot. We did some ice fishing, but usually we're hunting then. But as soon as you get back out in the water, like we were trout fishing in the spring when ice was off, then the bass started. You started doing that. We started fishing some tournaments with my dad at a pretty young age, just out of a bass tracker. I mean, until I was probably 22 years old was when my dad finally bought a bass boat, and it was an old used one. But we fished tournaments in the 17-foot bass tracker with a 9.9, like all over the place. Won a ton of money out of that boat. But all through high school, man, I had a group of friends, and that's what we did. Like we would get off school, we would go home. One of our moms would drive us and drop us off somewhere. We'd fish till dark. They would pick us up. Then we got driver's license, and that was what we did. And it probably kept us out of a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Because that was literally, we would have the rods and stuff and, in the truck, and school would be done and everybody would pile in the vehicles, and we'd drive down to the river and stay there till we had to be home at 9:00 or whatever time and go home. Probably hurt my grades, but it kept me from getting involved in any other nefarious activities. So,
I mean, I'd take a C over jail.
Yeah. And we grew up, we're all pretty similar age. And I know, looking at our statistics, if they're somewhat accurate, a lot of folks that listen to us are in that, 28 to 40 range. I mean, that was a time when drugs and all that were getting really bad. Like I remember I could have gone into the bathroom at the high school and bought anything I want. Like you name it, and you could have bought it in the bathroom off somebody. And it's like, no, I got $50 in my pocket. I'm going to run up to Gander Mountain and buy me a new spinning rod or something. I'm not going to, I'm not going to waste it on drugs. So it truly did probably keep us out of trouble, because everybody called us rednecks. I grew up in a pretty suburban area. And that was just what we did. Drive our big old Tonka trucks. That's what everybody used to call our trucks, even though they were just, I think, like Dodge.
Did you have like a Skeet Reese style Tonka truck?
No.
Oh,
no, I didn't have. He's got the Ford, like F650 or something.
I don't know. F5050.
So yeah, I mean, really, that bass is what got me hooked on bass fishing. But as far back as I remember, we were fishing somewhere doing something, and my dad's dad didn't fish really, so my dad was kind of the one that got involved, and then from there we had friends that did it, and so we would go with them and do that kind of stuff. But man, lots of good memories as I think about just, and bad. We almost died a couple times. Sunk a boat.
Oh yeah,
boat in 34-degree water on Lake Erie one time.
Well, we'll have to get your dad on sometime and tell that story.
Yeah, that was a bad one.
And you gotta have.
It's truly a miracle that I'm here. Like, honestly, we'll get him on next time he comes down.
Well, for those who can actually see us, this table. And we mentioned it a few times, but Pete's dad made this table and brought it all the way down from PA. Mm-hmm. And this thing weighs like, I don't know, at least 16 tons.
Yeah.
So it was a joy bringing it in here in the room. But you got to have his dad tell the stories because there's no other way that anybody could tell them like him.
Yeah,
for sure.
We'll have to put an E tag on that one.
But you said something. You said, man, in your facial expression right there, your eyes widened up, like you got a smile on your face, and it basically just unlocked some memories.
It was like my life flashed for you, man. Just thinking about.
There you go.
You don't think about that stuff all the time, but then you start talking about it, and it's like, man,
yeah,
it's crazy.
You can't put a number on that stuff, and tying it back to like how you get someone into fishing, or man, why you may need to get somebody into fishing, right? To unlock some of that imagination, to create some memories. There's a lot of people out there that literally go through the daily grind, and it's like Groundhog Day, and they really don't have they feel like they don't have a sense of purpose, or they just don't have anything to look forward to. We all get in that rut. Like, I mean, I've been in that rut before. Right now with my long days at work, like I just feel like I have no time to even think. Heck, it was even hard to think of a podcast we were going to shoot, right? But then we started unlocking some memories, you know, and talking about this stuff. So just seeing both of your guys' nonverbals, like as you start talking about your experiences, makes this hobby, right? Because it is a hobby or a sport or whatever. It makes it worth it. And it's not for everybody though.
I'm glad you brought up like using it as a tool to get people out of a dark place, because it really, I mean, and we've all done it our whole lives, but I remember like going through a tough time. I was not making the best choices in life. I was an adult at that point, but had gone through, you know, bad relationship, blah, 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 the normal stuff. And I remember my buddies, man, just constantly hammering my phone and texting and calling like, you need to come fishing, get out of the house, let's go, blah, blah, blah. And finally one day you like drag yourself out, and it doesn't take long, and you like got the bug, and you're like, okay. And then your weekends, and you start doing more positive things. So like if you know somebody that's feeling a little down, even if they've never fished, like just getting outside is good. And it's a good way to get somebody out. I mean, my mom doesn't fish, but she'll go out on the boat with my dad, and she lays on the deck up there or on the back deck while he's fishing, and reads a book and suntans just because it's good to get out on the sun. You get to spend time with people,
get some vitamin D.
Vitamin D. But yeah, it's definitely a tool you can use. And there, you know, there's more organizations. We've talked about some of them. They're trying to use that to help our heroes, you know, our veterans, even our police, fire, EMS, doctors, nurses, you know, all those folks that have had to deal with so much over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
When you think about, you know, war and just civil unrest and everything going on in the country, and the pandemic and just the craziness that our life is, like for me, like when I get fishing, I don't have to think about any of that. Whether I'm fishing a tournament, or it's just Trey and I, or Ben and I, or the three of us are out there, or I'm with my wife, and we're all just busting each other's balls and just having fun. And I literally have never been on the water and thought like, man, I can't believe this is going on. It's like, no, that stuff completely gets pushed out of your head.
That's a great point. And I want to hear about yours in a second, Trey, one of your earliest fishing memories. But the great thing about fishing, and again, it's not for everybody, but everyone, you know, processes being out in the water differently, right? A lot of folks just do it for an escape, to push everything out. A lot of people are doing it for a competitive thing. You know, me personally, like I'm out there. It's not this is going to sound weird. So I love fishing. It's relaxing for me because I'm not focused on other stuff, but it's also not relaxing because I get so frustrated sometimes at these silly little green fish. Like, it's just like, come on now. I now with life scope, like I can see you're there and you're looking at my bait and you won't eat it. Right. So, you know, I can get frustrated and high strung on the water sometimes. You know, you get a backlash or something, but still, like, then I'm focusing on that, you know, that type of stuff, and not, you know, all the ancillary things that may be going on in the world.
But answer this. You get frustrated. You get irritated. They're not biting. You see they're there. You get a backlash. You tie a bad knot, whatever. How many times have you just said, that's it, I'm done, I'm leaving? Like you're at a job and you're doing whatever job you're doing, and you're just annoyed because the people around you suck, and you just don't like that day, and you're like, dude, I just can't wait to go home. Do you think like that on the water? Like, yeah, I'm just going home.
So
I'm not going to say I haven't said it. So I've never actually followed through.
So it is different for me now because I live on a body of water. So when I can go out and I can tell right away if it's going to be like, if they're really on and chewing, or if it's really going to be a struggle. I'm like, well, there's about 9 other things I can go do. I'll come try tomorrow afternoon. I can just literally walk off my porch and there it is. Right. So it's a little bit different than that, but like used to when I go to big lakes, you know, or big, but our home lakes here, Jordan, Harris and stuff. When you're out there, like you're out there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you're not going to stop in the first hour or two.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to go at least probably 4, 5, 6, 7 hours. And we've all been there. We've gone 12, 14 hour days in the summertime, just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So like my situation is kind of unique in that regard because it's just such a small lake. Like you go check the spots, you're like, well,
They ain't gonna eat,
yeah, they're not quite in the mood today.
but you still got outside.
Oh yeah,
You
and
still got
you
on your
know,
boat. You could have walked the bank, whatever the case.
Yeah,
may
yeah,
be.
yeah.
I just know for me that even if I don't, I've had plenty of days where I haven't caught a fish.
Yeah.
Plenty of days. Most of the time it's in the winter, but plenty of days where I'm just like, but it's so hard for me to stop. Like I have to tell myself, I literally have to go home and I have to pick up my kid from school, or I have to pick up dinner or whatever. There has to be a task for me to like quit, or I'm going to run it until dark because I enjoy it, but I enjoy the challenge. Right. But it's not necessarily the challenge for everybody. You know, it just, there's so many different opportunities and it unlocks for people. So, but you want to hear about mine?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I grew up, well, I moved around a lot as a kid, but like primarily where I spent the majority of my time was on a lake house. But when I say lake, I mean like a really big mud puddle. But in that mud puddle was all the multi-species for northern strain. Largemouth were in there, pike were in there, bowfin, or we call them dogfish up north, catfish. And at the very bottom, I think there might have been lake trout or something in there too. But as far as fishing goes, I really grew up salmon fishing.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was, you know, on the big lake in Lake Michigan trolling, because my dad had a boat. He actually had a, what are those boats called? It wasn't a Thompson. It was, anyways, I can't remember what it's called, but it was a 28 footer, and we would troll during the summertime. And I just remember being out there, and that actually wasn't.
Was it a trophy?
It wasn't a trophy. I can't remember what it was called. I'll have to revisit it. But anyways, that was not as fun. I remember that being more like, dude, I'm ready to go home, right?
Yeah.
Because there'd be days where you weren't catching crap, or you'd be getting tore up by the flies. But fast forward into the September-October time frame when the Kings were making the run up the river systems, I would go up there with my dad, and I have some pictures of this. Actually, today's my dad's birthday, believe it or not. But so I would go up there every year with my dad, and I would be the guy that would net the fish, right? Because it would be really hard for a little kid to catch those 20, 30, 40-pound kings. But I remember when I was like 6 years old, I was up there, and my dad handed me the rod. We were up at Tippy Dam, which is in the Manistee River in Michigan. And he handed me the rod, and dude, it was on. Like it was on. And back in the day, you could snag, right? It wasn't illegal. So like, it didn't matter where the fish was hooked. And so it was like raking these giant beasts of salmon in. And I remember getting it in and my dad netting it. And then I remember him saying, hey, hold this bowl underneath the fish's butt. And it was a female. So he threw it over his shoulder. And as soon as he did that, all the eggs, we call it the skank, would come out, and then we'd sit there right on the shoreline.
A little bit of caviar.
Right. And before you had to actually borax your stuff, if it came out of the same water, you're good. And then we would literally tie our own spawn sacks and go right back at fishing, right? If we'd use Cleo's spawn sacks, but a lot of times it'd be lead weights with treble hooks on them and stuff. But that just got me so intrigued with catching fish. But I will say that between joining the Army in 2005 to 2000, really in 2014, 15, there was a huge gap for me of not fishing. And you hear that a lot out of, I'm sure your friends say it all the time. Man, it's been 20 years since I've been fishing. And they always say, man, I'd love to go fishing. I'd love to go fishing, but they just never do it. And for some odd reason, I was just like, I'm going to do this. Yeah. And I signed up. And I still got the picture. I'll have to send it to Pete so we can post it. But it's like a little Plano tackle box, which I still have in there, and 2 spinning rods that I went and fished my very first bass tournament. And I didn't even have a clue what I was doing. But I had so much fun. It was 2 fish. We caught the whole day. I was on Jordan Lake, like 9 hours, straight up pissing down rain. And for some odd reason, it was the most enjoyable thing I had done in years, man. And then that unlocked a lot of those memories, you know what I'm saying? So for me, that's kind of how like Pete, like you grew up in a fishing family, fished multi-species and stuff. but I really didn't get hooked on the species until recently.
Yeah, it's there's just something about bass, and there was a period of time where we didn't really bass fish. We got really heavy into musky fishing and traveled around, throwing giant baits on big, heavy telephone poles, which you can do for bass now. I mean, we caught a lot of bass doing that. Bass, I wish I had a cell phone to get pictures of because I know there were some giants back then, but those were like trash fish when we were musky fishing.
Yeah.
That's interesting about bass fishing is that part of the reason is that there is such an industry behind it, and there is,
the most talked about,
right? Especially like, kind of our formative years, late 90s, early 2000s. Again, we didn't do a lot of fishing then, or at least I didn't. But it was all over TV and like,
well, it was everywhere.
Right.
I mean, with the non-endemic sponsors back there, you walked into a gas station and Kevin Van Dam was holding a bag of Doritos.
So like we grew up seeing that, even if we weren't into the sport at the time. But two, like bass they're just ubiquitous. Like they were in all 49 states. You can catch them shallow all year long. We all know there's summertime in the South. Like it's harder to catch them shallow, but you can still catch fish shallow on the bank in the summertime because people do it all the time. And you can, and the thing about bass is that they're so aggressive that you can fish a bazillion different ways and catch them. And it goes back to the imagination. Like put a hot dog on, you can catch a bass.
100%.
I caught him on a piece of grass before.
Yeah,
exactly.
On a hook.
Yeah.
I caught him on a straight hook.
Yeah.
I caught him on a piece of candy.
Yeah.
You're using a gummy worm?
No, I was using one of those orange slices and dragging it across the top of duckweed. Duckweed. And it just topwater blow up on the Cape Fear River.
There's a video going around social media now of a guy catching a big old largemouth on a croc. Did you see that one?
On a croc?
It's like the little kid's croc.
What?
He put a treble hook in the bottom, one out of the back with a feather on it, and somehow put an eye with a wire through it so he couldn't pull it. And he's throwing it out there, and he was just twitching it real fast across the surface. And this like 4.5 pounder comes up and just freaking swallows it, dude, on a bright pink little kid's croc.
Speaking of which, topwater, that's the other thing. Like bass, they will hit topwater a lot, and right,
just about year round.
Yeah.
Outside of like this really cold fall weather.
Yeah, and but there's still some guys just swear they'll throw buzz baits in like 55.
As soon as it hits 50 degrees.
Exactly, right. And a few years ago when the heavy hitters were here, like Jacob, I think it was Jacob, we was catching him on a frog in Harris, and the water was like 55.
No, that was Dave Lefebvre. Smoked him on a frog in Harris.
Yeah.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, he caught a pile of them on a frog in Harris, and I'm like, I can't even hardly ever get bit on a frog in Harris.
Yeah, I know. So I mean, and that's part of the reason why it's so popular, right? Because anyone can access them pretty much.
And that goes back to what I said. Like, there's no right or wrong way to do it. Like, we were blown away that he was catching them on a frog in March, but he had no problem picking that up and throwing that frog.
That's right.
That's what he was comfortable doing and knew he could get bit, and he did it. And that's why it's so cool. And if you join a club and you do tournament fish, or you get a group of friends that do, and you all fish fish the same body of water, and you talk afterwards, I almost guarantee you that everybody caught them doing something a little bit different.
Oh yeah.
Like you might all be throwing a wacky rig, but I guarantee it's 3 different colors, or you were doing 3 different things with it, or
different location.
A different location. Somebody was shallow, somebody was mid depth, somebody was deep. Like, there's no right or wrong way, and that's, for me, that's always kind of been the allure. Is you're not fishing against anything but yourself and what the Lord's provided us. Like, it doesn't matter what the other people are doing. And that's when you get caught up in dock talk and all that. We've talked about that. Like, not catching other people's fish. Like, just go out and do what you want to do. And like, however you want to do. If you want to catch fish in 6 inches of water when it's 91 degrees. Look, I was actually just talking to my wife about this. Like, when I first got down here and first started fishing, like, the only thing I did on Jordan Lake, regardless of the time of year, was flip jigs on laydowns.
I flipped the Texas rig on laydowns. Yeah.
Pile of fish. And then I said, I got to learn how to do other things. I don't catch nearly as many fish as I would.
That's right.
When I flip and jig on laydowns. I'm like, she's like, yeah, you're right. You hardly ever fish a jig anymore. I'm like, that's because I want to catch them doing other things, but I need to just go back and do what I know worked for me.
In the summertime, like on Jordan, there's one cove. I'm sure there's just standing little laydowns, right? All in there. You just take a little Texas rig trick worm, and you're bound probably to pick up 2 fish going through that cove and all. And, they weren't big or anything, right? And so that's why we've probably transitioned to other spots looking for those bigger fish and improve our game. But one memory I have although this was October, it wasn't quite summer, but I'm going in that cove, my little spot. I'm going on and I see a bass, and you know how dirty Jordan is,
Mhm.
but I see this bass almost on the surface, just nosed up in like 6 inches of water with his nose up against the lay down. You know how they get,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh, I see you. And I literally flipped him on his head, and he picked it up and had him in the boat in like 3 seconds. Like I was like, I called my shot on that
Yeah.
one. I'm like, you know, that rarely happens unless it's spawn.
You're
Yeah.
And then you got to work them. So that was cool. I did want to ask you guys kind of your favorite, maybe tournament fishing memory, because we've all tournament fished. And I asked that because, you know, we've talked about being young and just going out and having some great memories but we're all interested in this. We talk a lot about tournaments and all, and it is a competitive level, and we've all had bad ones. We probably had more bad ones than really great ones. So I just like, what's your favorite memory where everything kind of went right?
Trey, you want to go first?
Yeah, man. Like, so that can be a loaded question, right? Like everybody loves to win. And listen, like this is transitioning into tournament stuff as Ben talked about. And I do have questions for you guys after the fact too, or not after my story, but later on. Tournament fishing, man. So there's two of them, and they're both wins. I've won a few tournaments and stuff, but the first tournament that I ever fished by myself out of my boat, when I didn't have a spot lock trolling motor, when I really didn't have really a clue. I had the hook 5s that came standard on the boat, and I was done with my probationary period in the old club I used to fish. And I was so jacked. I was so pumped up. I was like, I felt like I was a big kid now, you know, even though I'm like 30 something.
Yeah.
and I'm like, all right, dude, this is it. Like, this is it. And so I go out, and I was fishing Sharon Harris, right? Everybody hates Sharon Harris, but I love it. It's my home lake, I would consider. And, it's a hard lake to fish tournaments. I knew that, but I dedicated myself to fishing where I believed the fish were at. I didn't really have much knowledge,
Was there grass?
No, there was no grass.
This is after the grass.
This is after the grass kill. And dude, first couple hours in the morning, I catch one keeper, which was under 16 inches. And then I went through a whole slew of like 16 to 19 inch bass. And I was catching them all on a chatterbait, a bladed jig, a chatterbait. It was a chatterbait, G-Man original chatterbait. Your Walmart specials, man. And I was having a blast. And then I went to a spot and I stood on my trolling motor facing into the east wind, right? East wind.
Yeah. And for all the old wives' tales, east wind.
Wind out of the east, fish bite the least.
Yep. Fish out of wind out of the west, fish bite the best. Facing into an east wind, controlling my trolling motor, throwing a 5XD, sexy shad crankbait, with I don't even remember what size line, I don't even remember what size reel or what reel and rod combination. All I know is I caught a fish that was over 20 inches and another fish that was under 16 inches, and I won the tournament. My very first tournament. And then the same year, I know it's long, and then the same year, the very last tournament of the year, I fished a Lake Randleman, where I never had been before. And it was in November. It was brutally cold at the time. There's no map card for that lake. I don't even know if I had updated graphs anyway, so when it mattered. And everything I caught 4 fish all day on a white spinnerbait on isolated rock chunk. But after the second fish, it was like something clicked, man. I was like, oh, this is what they're talking about when they mean find a pattern.
Yeah.
And I won the tournament with like 13 pounds for 4 fish. And so those are the two. I know you asked about one, but like that year was the most memorable year of tournament fishing. I'll never forget it, man. It was such a cool experience. And I'll circle back around to my questions later.
You know, it's interesting that sometimes those years just go right. Because I had a similar experience in, I think, in 2017. It was my first full year with the club. And but the one I'll talk about here, Lake McIntosh in October. And this video is on YouTube. If you go to the YouTube channel, you go back there and you can see everything that I did. But on that lake, I had practiced. I ran all the way west. It's about 6 miles long under 2 bridges. I don't know if either one of you guys have been to Lake McIntosh.
Nope.
But at the almost at the very west part of the lake, it makes a 90-degree dog leg south, right? And it goes maybe a quarter mile, and then a dog legs right, 90 degrees. And basically it dries up there. If the water's a little high, you can get back there, but that's basically as far as you can go. So in practice, I'd been catching them, crankbait, jig, Texas rig there. Okay, I think. So on tournament morning, I run there, but I stop right when you go under that second bridge, and I pull up a little cove there because my plan was to make my way down there, make my way to the juice. First cast, 5-pounder. KVD splash, top water. And they say, oh, you never catch a fish in the first one. That's bad. 2 cast later, 4-pounder. Couple of small ones. Anyway, I basically, that little stretch there, I rotated all day on both sides of the bank. It's really narrow. And I had a 6-pounder hit at the boat. And I would put that, I think I had 7 or 8 bites all day. 2 of them came off, so I put 6 in the boat, so cold 1 out. I would only put down that top water when I had arthritis. My hands were so sore for working that. I pick up a crankbait or a jig and drag around for 5 or 10 minutes. I'm like, well, this ain't working. So I'm going to, and like I said, it's 7 bites all day. I went a long time without bites, but I knew it worked. And I ended up weighing in 22.8 pounds. And like I walk it up, and he's like, "Oh, you guys." I was like, "Yeah, I got a decent bag," and everyone's just like, "Holy crap!" Because I think the second had like 12 or 14 pounds or something.
Yeah.
And it was just the only time I've blown, I think, everyone out. Because the other one I won that year was a lot closer. It was like 12 pounds over 2 days, right? Tough on the Chowan River in August or whatever it was.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things that magical days that went right. It was just like,
yeah,
it's just meant to be sometimes.
And you cracked it over a 20-pound bag, dude.
Yeah, when it's your time.
That's still my best tournament bag ever.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of days where I've caught more.
And that's interesting because I have never, like, for everyone listening, I've never won a tournament with a limit. Never. Like, I've won, I think, like 4 or 5 club tournaments. And yeah, I've never won a tournament with a limit of bass. That's crazy.
Yeah.
To think about that.
That's wild.
Yeah.
What about you?
What you got, man?
So I two I have to share real quick. So the first one was the first storm I ever fished. I was probably 10 years old, and they didn't do a number draw blast off. They did everybody idle out to the no wake zone, get to the edge of no wake. The tournament director blew an air horn on a bullhorn, and everybody just went
Shotgun blast.
Shotgun blast. So it was on Lake Erie. I think there were 75 boats. So there were 74 bass boats, and there was my dad and I in our bass tracker with a 9.9, and they blew that horn, and I just remember those bass boats. They're just blowing by us, right? We're waking, and I'm like, this is the greatest thing I've ever done in my life. And like that, so that was one that will always stick with me. And part of why I felt I much rather would have a number and like one at a time go, but that shotgun blast was something that kind of got me hooked. And then
monster truck rally.
And then honestly, a fun one for me down here was the first club tournament I fished with my club. We were fishing on Falls Lake. I'd never stepped foot on Falls Lake. It was March, I believe. The water was a little bit high. It was like 2 foot up.
Ooh, good times.
It was late March. It might even been in April because I ended up losing a fish that I saw on a bed. But regardless, I knew what the water conditions were, so I did a bunch of map study, and I was like, I'm just gonna go in there. I'm gonna put this spinnerbait in my hand, my springtime spinnerbait, and I'll show a picture of it sometime on here. And I'm just gonna put my foot on the trolling motor, and I'm gonna cover water, and I might catch 5 fish. And I rolled up to where I was going to start, and I was going to run this stretch. It had some lay downs, and some grass was in the water because it was up. And like my third cast, I catch like a 1.5 pound fish. Nothing big, but I'm like, well, at least one ate it. So So we'll see what happens. So I go down the bank a little bit more and I'm fishing a lay down, and I get to the left side of the lay down, fishing right to the left. And I throw up in there and I take it off the first branch, another like pound and a half. I'm like, all right, so this is going to work. I think I only ended up with like 7 bites the whole day, 8 because I sight fished that one. They ended up breaking me off, but I ended up finishing second. I didn't win, but like it was just, they all thought I was a ringer because I'd never fished them before. And I come in and take second. And all morning I was like, I've never been on this lake. So I had 2 rods on my deck. I had a flipping rod and I had that spinnerbait rod.
You said falls in
March.
March.
It was falls like end of March.
And that can be a different.
So, yeah.
You know, our club used to always go to falls in March, and like it's that time of year, it's hit or miss. Like the weekend prior, they may be catching 30-pound bags, and the very same PBC, if they're out there like next week or 2 weeks later, sometimes it takes like 14.
That's right.
I think water temp plays a role.
Yeah.
Like it was starting to warm up. Like I said, I saw one on a bed, so they were starting to move up. The water was high. It was like, I'm trying to remember. It was like 57 or 58 degrees. So they were starting to slide up shallow to feed up, and it had to be a little warmer. I was probably closer to 60.
What year this was?
It was last year.
Okay, last
so
year.
I can go back and look, but yeah, it was just really cool to like. It was the first time I never had pre-fished a lake or spent any time on it, and I just did map study and like figured out areas where I thought would have been good transition areas for pre-spawn fish, and to go out there and have that whole plan that I thought in my head actually worked. Like it was like one of those light bulb moments. It's never happened again since down here. Like, I mean, we could talk about frustrating tournament weekends and all that. Like,
let's not bring up those bad memories.
No, I mean, I'll tell you, like one of the most frustrating down here for me was down on the Roanoke. Like I pre-fished the weekend before a tournament, and I fished Saturday and Sunday. And Sunday, I had like 28 pounds before 7:30 a.m. I found a bunch of big fish. Like I was like, I left that area after I caught them. I knew there were more, and I'm like, I'm going to come back in here next weekend. I'm going to smoke this. And literally the next day we got temperatures unseasonably warm, like 95, 96 in early June. And it stayed like that all week, and it killed every single pad and every single creek where I'd found fish, and those fish were gone. They had all left because those pads died. So I rolled in there and was like, and I think I weighed like 1 fish on the first day, and then I figured out a little something for the second day. But like, that's the frustrating thing, but that's what keeps us going back. Cause it's like, I swear every time I have a great practice, like I bomb.
I'm telling you.
Like,
well, you know, yeah, it's always, if you practice well, your tournament's going to be absolutely terrible. That's
I think who somebody made a post. One of the Elite Series anglers made a post like, I wish practice was 5 days and not 3 days, because then I could be a 5-day practice.
That was John Suckup.
Yeah,
Suckup
John
said it. Yeah,
Suckup.
John Suckup. Yeah, he posted that. I saw
I gotta be a
yesterday.
5-day practice champion.
I saw another one post yesterday. Like, this is my 3rd year in a row claiming the practice championship belt. He was holding like a 6-pounder.
So that I wanted to ask you guys, you know, fishing and tournament fishing are 2 completely different things. I believe they are.
Yeah.
Like fishing is just fishing. And when you talk to your friends that don't fish, they absolutely have their version of fishing, which is sitting on the bank or sitting on a boat, drinking a beer and waiting for something to tug on the line.
Yep.
And then you got people like us and a lot of the tournament anglers, they know exactly what their definition of fishing is. But growing up fishing for fun in general, but then getting into the tournament side of it, have you stopped having as much fun? I'll leave that open. Like, is it less fun?
So for me, sometimes yes. Now, part of this is because, you know, I am out there and I try to force feed sometimes, or a lot of, like, if you look at my deck, most of the rods are rigged up of a OneCast fishing product, right? Because I want to be able to go out, make a video, get content using the products that I make, right? To show people that they work. So, you know, sometimes it's frustrating. You go out there and you need to change techniques and stuff, and it's still fun and great, you know, to catch fish and all. But you know, as you're running the business and you're going out there for a purpose to try to make content, that sometimes it's trying to phrase this the right way, because I still love catching fish.
Sure.
It gets
And
frustrating
also-
when you can't
right.
catch them the way you
If I'm
want.
catching my crankbait, I'm still going to post it on Instagram. Like, look at this 5 or 6 pounder or whatever I caught out here, But it is frustrating that I couldn't get them to bite the jig or to bite a Ned rig or something, right?
Right.
Yeah. Whatever I'm throwing. But it's still a great day out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when it for sure did, but I've tried to not let it impact me as much here lately. Like, I think I posted something from my last tournament where, like, I had or 2 tournaments ago, I had a really good fishing day. Like, it was a terrible tournament day, but it was a really fun day of fishing. Like, I lost fish that probably would have put me, could have cashed a check if I would have caught them. Just missed opportunities, things like that. And I still had fun. I still recognize, like, it was a really fun day fishing. Like, caught a bunch of bowfin that were fun to catch. Caught a lot of bass. A lot of them were short, but it was still fun. So I've been trying to change my attitude to where like I don't let it get me down. Like, I was still out fishing. Chelsea was still with me, so I got to spend time with my wife. She was fishing as my co-angler. Like, I was out on the water, even though it was miserable hot, and I wanted to fall out and die half the time because it was like 9,000 degrees with a 900% humidity. I've tried to change that, and I get where you're coming from, because we did it some on Harris this year. Where, like, we caught a bunch of fish, but they were all like either shorts or whatever, and we're like, oh, short fish, and you're like, it's still a fish. Like,
It's still fun.
it's still fun to catch them.
I understand the point, because we want to go catch big fish. We want to say I caught 5 for 25 or whatever it is. Brag to our buddies, tell them we're on the juice and all. You can't really say you're on the juice when you catch 51.5 pounders. I mean, we're not in MLF,
Well,
here.
MLF it used to be.
Not the OG.
So that's a good point. And Trey, you can give your answer to your own question here in a second. One of the best days I had fishing was just over a year ago, and it was on the flipping jig, the Snaggles flipping jig. It hadn't been released yet, right? Because we hadn't gotten the iCast. But I was fishing it. I didn't take cameras or anything out there. Not trying to make content, just going out having fun. And I caught 24 pounds in like 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
6 something, a 5.8 and a 5.4, and one was 3, and then like a little dink. I was like, man, it would have been awesome to have a camera, but I still love that day. I had a great.
Yeah.
Obviously, I took my phone out and took pictures and stuff. That was one of the best days, because I didn't take the cameras and stuff out. I wasn't focused. I was just going out there to have fun.
Yeah.
All right. So it also kind of is the mindset when you're going. It's hard to go catch a 51-pound fish, during a tournament when you're going to need 2.5, 3 pounders to catch, to cash a check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So it's situational.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the things you hear out of a lot of people. Man, I'm done tournament fishing because it took the fun out of fishing.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of people that say that. And I said that myself too. I took a break. I took 2 years off from really tournament fishing or 2 or 3 years. Well, mostly because I was deployed and doing other stuff, but I really did. It was my fault. It's my fault. Right. And I say that because I wasn't taking the stress and the pressure and using it for something positive, like a good amount of stress, or a balanced amount of stress and balanced pressure and some fear and some other things. That's good for the human mind to feel that, sometimes, not all the time, but like, it's good to have that, because what that does is it challenges you. Like, and if you go out there, especially on the tournament side, and you don't feel like you're being challenged and you don't really feel like it's doing anything for you, then maybe it's not for you. But then you got the guys who are like, it's just taking the fun out of it. Well, maybe channeling that energy in a different way is maybe going to make it a little bit more fun. And if like, for instance, I don't like fishing against guys that are always going to take my money. Well, there's a difference between fishing against guys that blatantly cheat and are going to take your money, and then fishing against guys that are really damn good, right?
Yeah.
Like we talked about it before. If you put Jesse Wise and Mike Corbusier on Falls Lake, I want to fish against them because I know that I'm going to have to challenge myself against 2 individuals who have a extreme amount of talent, experience, knowledge, all the above. And so I want to challenge myself. And that's what keeps that drive going, right? So channeling your energy is important. And I think like in the tournament world, people get so deterred by bad performances and then they blame it on something else. Like, it just sucks, man. This lake sucks, or the fish suck, or whatever, right? They want to find a way to blame something else rather than saying, maybe I'm not channeling this energy the way I need to channel it. You know what I'm saying? I kind of brought that up because I did listen to another show, and it was brought up, and it was Mercer's show with Jacobson. It was great how he talked about channeling energy. He didn't talk about that specifically, but just mindset in general. And so like so many people talk about like, man, I used to tournament fish, but it really took the fun out of it, so I don't fish anymore. But then there is something probably missing in that person's life. And we talk about getting into fishing, or maybe getting back into fishing, right? You don't have to use tournaments and stuff like that. But I wanted to ask you guys the mindset.
That's interesting. I don't think I fished a tournament. I might have fished one last year, but like I really haven't tournament fished in 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple Tuesday nighters here and there. And part of it is I don't have the time to be able to practice like I would like to dedicate to it.
Yep.
Two, with running the business, I run my schedule now that I'll work on Saturday, but I can go fish when no one else is on the water.
Yeah.
Right. Because I hate the summertime. It gets dangerous out there in falls in Jordan with all the boats out there. And it's 100 degrees and you try to pull up. There's 5 other tournaments and you pull up on every single spot you want to go to. You know how it is here. Yeah. Every brush pile, everyone knows where it's at practically. And so, that frustrates you. It does challenge you. And maybe I need to find a better job of overcoming those challenges, frustrations. But I have found it more enjoyable to fish when I want to fish.
Yeah. The other question I had for, and this, so I actually have a couple more questions for you. I'm doing the interviews here. What is one of the worst habits that you have?
I don't change lures enough.
Okay.
Or change colors.
Okay.
I mean, that's hands down number one. I'm like, I should probably take this off and maybe change colors, or I should take this off and tie something else on, or I need to dig down the bottom of my tackle box. I think this actually might work. Yeah. And I don't do it sometimes.
Okay. You're trying to force a bite with a bait that just may not be working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm 100% guilty of that a lot of the times.
Yeah.
And again, some of that comes back because I want to try to catch fish from the products, that I make. But
when you do, it's extremely rewarding.
Oh no, 100%.
Right. But that goes back to what Pete was talking about though. Like, you can fish any way you want, right? But there's a flip side of that coin. What do you think your worst habit is?
The exact same as Ben. I don't change especially colors. Like, I'll change baits, but I'm pretty hamstrung. If you look through my boat, like, you're only going to find green, pumpkin, black and blue, and white, and that's it.
Yeah, I'm pretty simple.
I really don't have a drop shot. I'll have, what is that color?
Morning dawn.
Morning dawn. Summer. I was gonna say summer's dawn, summer's eve.
Yeah.
Morning dawn. Like, outside of that, I don't really carry a bunch of different colors or do a whole lot of different things. Crankbaits are like the same. I have shad color, I have gill color, and I have crawd color, and that's it. Like, I don't.
No chartreuse.
Not really. I mean, I might have a few, but I don't. It's not something that I've really got bit on a bunch. But then there's times I've thrown it and it has gotten bit, but I don't dedicate time to changing. And it's like those days when you're like, even with forward facing, you're like, man, those fish are there that should be biting. It might be something as simple as a color change, and I'll still won't do it because there's no reason they shouldn't bite a green pumpkin.
Exactly.
But
and the other one, and right, this also fascinates me with watching some of the elite guys, is that they may be fishing a jig, but they'll alternate weight sizes.
Yeah.
Different trailers, right, for different fall rates and different presentations. And I'm like, if they're going to bite a jig, they just bite the jig.
Yeah.
Right. There's a reason why the attention to detail, and right, that's why they're where they're at. Because
there's a whole nother level, and that's exactly it. That's why they're there, because they think like that.
Well, so the other day, for example, we were out on Harris, a month and a half ago, and I was throwing that 3/4 ounce chatterbait because I had tied that on there, or the snagless bladed jig, because we were fishing kind of deep, and I wanted to have that right ticket on the bottom. Well, I get out on my lake, which is just now got coontail from 10 foot to 2 foot, right? That's what I had tied on. I'm like, well, I don't know if this works or not. So I chucked that thing out there. Actually, sure enough, it actually comes through that grass amazing. And he actually gets in the bottom of that grass. I caught a couple of fish that way. So that's a scenario that it actually worked. I didn't think it would, going back, just use your imagination. But
instead of tying on another bait, you were lazy and just threw it. Was already tied on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And I've done that several times. Like,
yeah.
I'm fishing, a points and ledges. So I'm using a football jig.
Yeah.
But then there's a brush pile. And I want to flip into it. Well, I just flip in with the football jig. Even though, you can do it. Obviously, it works. But obviously, you typically want a different type of head style so you don't get caught up as bad.
Right.
Sometimes I catch fish doing that. Sometimes I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting. I've gotten better. I think my worst habit, and it was only on a couple lakes, because a lot of the other lakes I just don't have a lot of experience on, but I've been on them, is I've gotten better at it, but running history is hard not to do.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I think, watch and like dock talk, right? So not dock talk as we're talking at the docks, but I consider watching YouTube dock talk. I consider reading stuff dock talk, right? When you start letting other people's opinions and their experiences shape your decision-making process, sometimes it may work out and sometimes you may get burned doing that.
That's an interesting point you bring up. And if we circle back to the beginning, like if you're going out trying to learn how to fish, all those, mechanisms, right? YouTube, social media, reading the books, magazines, talking to the people at the dock, that all plays an important to learn things.
Yeah.
But then we all know once you get a certain level of experience, you kind of know what you're doing out there. Sometimes it's very easy that you start going
second guessing yourself,
but you start chasing, fish in a way that you're not comfortable with necessarily.
That's right.
Mhm.
Yep.
And there are times to do that, to push yourself, but then sometimes you just got to go with your instinct and be like,
yeah,
it's just, I'm going to live and die by what I love to do.
Yeah.
What is something that you've learned, like a new technique so I'm going to give you an example. I'll start off. I was absolutely not convinced with a pop R style bait, right? Absolutely not. Like, I'm a spook walking bait type of guy, frog, buzz bait.
I'm the opposite. I'm
right.
90% of the time I'm tying on a popper style bait, top water.
It took me until a tournament this year on Falls Lake with my partner. Dude, we caught over 40 fish all day long on a popper. And I could not believe it. It gained me so much confidence. But I also find myself sometimes looking at a bait, just looking at it. And I'm like, that ain't going to work, man. And then I won't throw it. Even though I have it, how many baits do you have that you just never throw?
A bunch.
You know what I mean? I don't know if that's the same for you guys.
No, I don't have too many that I don't throw. I might have some colors and stuff, but
colors and plastics, right? Or probably
but if it's in there, I probably throw it sometimes throughout the year to try to get bit on it. I see what you're saying. Like, but again, like with a popper, you fish your popper completely different than the traditional way of fishing.
I do.
Like, you fish it like you make it walk. You're just throwing a micro walking bait. You don't actually pop it.
I started doing
so like you put your own twist on it, and it's a little bit different than a regular walking bait.
But
that's where I said, like, there's no right or wrong way. Like that day we fished and we caught all those topwater fish. I was fishing the popper like a popper. I was popping it 2 or 3 times, and you were throwing it out there like a walking bait. And we were both catching fish.
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
It's putting your own spin. You're more comfortable working it that way. You don't like making it pop, and it works for you. So that's what you stick with, So that's where it's cool. Like,
I used to be the pop, pause, pop. Meekin picked me up one day, right? So Mike, one of our buddies that used to live on the lake, he picked me up on his Ranger one day. I brought a frog with me because I'd been having some frog bites, worm or something. I'm fishing in the back of his boat. And I don't catch a fish. I'm throwing a frog and over the grass and all. He's throwing a popper, a KVD splash, whatever it was. No, it wasn't. I forget the actual brand, but he was walking like a walking bait, and he caught like 18 pounds right in front of me. I'm just like, oh my god! So the very next morning, I tied on my popper style bait, and I went out there and crushed him. Right, and remember that day we were out there, I was like, pick up that popper and throw it that pad right there.
That's right. Yep.
and there were a 5-pounder. Was
It
there.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's different presentations.
Yeah.
Like the same bait. I don't know if there's really a technique that I.
So what was one of the first things, or so your first fish on a flutter spoon came this year, right?
Yeah. So I guess that. I mean, I'd fished it before, but that was the first time I caught a fish on it. I don't know that I learned it. Like I knew how to throw it.
Yeah, but you're pretty good at it now.
But
You know?
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's probably this year was throwing that flutter spoon and just getting confidence with
That
it.
time I made that video with the flutter spoon was
Oh yeah, everybody knows that video.
one of the first times I had a lot of success on a flutter spoon.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like it either works or it doesn't.
Yeah, it's
that
Yeah.
day.
it's
And
either
when it does work, it's a ton of fun.
you know,
So
hair jig is something I hardly ever throw.
Yeah.
yeah, me too.
Right, and it's something I should probably do more of, especially in the wintertime.
Yeah, but they're either on that or they're not.
Just kind of like just like a spoon. Right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times that bites.
There's only one bait to throw in the wintertime. And that's an A-rig. You don't need anything else.
Jig and
As
spoon.
long as I can throw an A-rig, that's what I'm throwing because them jokers eat it.
But so we talk about getting people into fishing, but then there's also when people are in fishing, like Ben and Pete and myself, we're in the tournament fishing, or we're just so racked up with gear that we just love fishing in general. You can still get people into new techniques, right? Like I've learned a lot from Pete. I've learned a lot from you. Like the continuing education is just something else that keeps me coming back, right? You talked about the toothpick and the tail of the thing. I didn't know about that till I saw it on TikTok the other day.
Yeah.
Not even gonna lie,
There's so much out there and everybody does things different. Everybody's got strengths. Like I like to think I'm an above average bed fisherman, and I'm hoping like you learn. I know my dad learned some stuff. He's been fishing for 50 years, but when we fish your tournament, the Heroes Harvest, like he didn't understand bed fishing. And I put a lot of time into like figuring out what you can get away with and stuff. And I had one on his bed. It ended up being a slot fish, so it didn't count. I ended up throwing back 5 slot fish that day, and then would have had 20-pound plus bag. But that's another story. But like the first one we rolled up, I seen it up there ahead of us, and I pulled down and I flipped up in there and wanted nothing to do with it. And he's like, "That fish isn't gonna bite." I was like, "Oh, it'll bite." So I took that white D-bomb and I flipped it in there past the bed, and I reeled it as fast as I could, and I smacked that fish in the side of the head, and it spun around and it grabbed the things and it took it off the bed, and I said, 2 more flips, I'll have it in the boat. I flipped it down there, did it again, wound it as fast as I could, smack that fish in the side of the head. It fell down to the bait. It picked it up by the tail, carried off. I said, it'll eat it this time. I wound it as fast as I could. Before I could hit it, that fish went. And he was like, I never would have thought you could do that to a fish on a bed. And I'm like, I've learned a lot down here.
Yeah.
But like, that was something that I never would have done that I learned a few years ago. And then, you saw me work that one this year. That like 4.5. I worked that fish for like 15 minutes, but I knew she was going to bite eventually.
Yeah.
Like you just learn how those fish behave. And
Absolutely.
Trey has taught me a ton this year about offshore fishing, because that was something I definitely was not as confident with. And we spent a fair bit of time on Harris, where there's a pretty good, I don't want to say there's pretty good. It's a lot easier, I think, to learn.
It's good training ground.
It's great because
Good
there's
training
a lot
ground.
there's a lot of fish that'll school up offshore, and you can learn what to look for. And things like that. You get bigger schools. It's not like trying to learn on Jordan where the schools are little,
No.
like
Well,
4 fish.
Ben talked about it before. Like, maybe it was on a live that we did. But how do you get over like not catching fish? How do you maintain a positive mental attitude? And you said what? Catch fish.
Catch a fish.
Catch a fish, right? So like when
I
you're
think that's
going,
what we had Stephanie on. She was talking
yeah,
about
like
that.
when you're out there trying to train, and it is training,
Mhm.
right? It's training, education, all that stuff, having fun. It's kind of hard to do it on the lake where you're not catching fish. It's just hard. Like you
Yeah.
just can't, like you're just not having fun. So you're not training. Your training sucks. You're not learning anything, right? That's the worst thing for me when you come off the water, you didn't learn anything. And that's one, I think that's where a lot of people like channel in that energy. I say again, like if you're trying to learn and that's part of the process and you learn something, even if you didn't catch a fish, but you're learning stuff more about like how lizards fall off the tree in the early spring, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Those types of things like that keeps you coming back for more. I want to share something with you guys. And I know that a lot of people get hit up on social media and stuff like that, but I think it's important. We talk about getting people into fishing. Here's my thought process on when somebody wants to get into fishing. There's a difference between wanting to learn how to fish and wanting to go catch someone's fish. right? So I got this message the other day. It says, I'm going to have to pay you to take me out or something. I saw your stuff from X Lake and I've had zero luck there, right? That was what it was. So I could have easily sent this person, and if you're listening, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but I could have easily sent this person waypoints. Could have easily done that. But that's not the way that I want to do it, right? The way that I want to do it is I want to look at your thought process, right? So this person then sent me the message today and says, I'm actually out on this lake right now, and we're going to see if we can, find them on some spots that have sharper drop-offs. That's exactly the verbiage that was used. And I was like, here's some things to think about, right? Because I want to know your thought process. Think about the current, think about the bait, think about the cover and the structure, think about the thermocline, think about the wind, the wind direction, right? And then some other correspondence happened. And I was like, if you find them, I was like, find the fish if you have electronics before you ever make a cast. Don't waste your time throwing where they aren't.
Yep.
And then if you find them on the bottom, hit them with a deep crankbait. And then after that, if you catch them, start finessing them. If you find them suspended, look at flutter spoons and swim baits and other techniques that are going to hit them in the middle. So like the way that I process this information is like, I don't want your waypoints. I don't want you to tell me where the fish are at. Unless it's like Peter Ben telling me like, hey, like legitimately go to these bed fish, like you're going to win, right? Because we don't have no information rules in club tournaments and stuff. But there are some ethical things with that. But when somebody's trying to learn how to fish, like you don't really do them any justice by just telling them where the fish are at.
Yeah.
You just don't. Like it might boost their confidence to catch a fish, but if they don't exercise their mind and think like a bass, then they're never going to learn. Right. And so that's just me. I wanted to share that little anecdote with you guys because that's been going on for months and months now. I've been sharing screenshots with you guys like of people hitting me up, and it does not bother me. Like, please send me messages.
No, I get them too. Trey and I.
Yeah.
Share
Like
screenshots all the
I
time.
think it's great, but don't get mad at me when I don't share waypoints with you, because I'm not going to do that, because that's not challenging you. That is not challenging you. Now, if you're saying I'm taking my son out there and I just want to put him on some fish, might be a different story.
Yeah.
But a lot of people use that as an excuse to get waypoints from people as well. So I just think like it's important, like getting people into fishing. And then the last thing I'll say, if you're going to take somebody fishing, sit down in the boat and control the trolling motor and like show them how to fish. Don't go up there and hammer all the fish right in front of them. This is just me. Like, that really, I remember being a kid and like sitting right next to my cousin who's whacking all these fish and I'm not catching a dang thing, and it deterred me from even having any fun. Like, I like to put the people on the fish. So like, I'm not a guide or anything, but like it really helps them when you're not whacking all the fish. That's just me. That's just a personal opinion, but I'm all about,
especially if you're taking somebody fishing for the first time. Like,
yeah,
the point is to have them catch fish.
There you go.
If you don't take them to a tough lake, like take them somewhere where
like
where you can go.
Like Gaston.
Yeah.
That is,
go to Gaston and find us one of them schools of dang spots and give them a drop shot rod and watch them catch 300.
Take them under any bridge.
Half a pound dang fish and just have the time of their life.
Yeah.
And then you can start to sprinkle in the harder stuff. But a lot of folks will be like, I went fishing on a boat for the first time. Well, where'd you go? Jordan Lake, and we never got bit. Yeah, probably not where I would have went the first time.
Yeah, it's one of those things. And that's some great advice there, I think, as we're kind of coming to the conclusion here. If you're taking somebody out fishing or people want to learn how to fish, do it when the conditions are best, right? Unless that's the only time they have. And what I mean is try not to go out in like August and July if you're in the South.
Yeah.
Right. Wait to the fall. It's cooler where if someone doesn't have experience, give them a spinning rod, just Texas rig it. Let them cast around. When there's a higher percentage, like there's just cast around these logs, right? We'll go around, or don't probably take about like in the middle of January.
Yeah,
when it's super cold, unless
you're going walleye fishing or something. I don't know.
You're on the juice at some spots, right? And because there you can fish very slow, and especially if they're on the bottom. But yeah, I mean, it's just you want to increase the chances they're going to catch a fish, right? So simple techniques.
Taking crappie fishing.
I was just going to say, like,
bluegill,
we're talking bass here, but you bring up a real good point.
Like, if you're just trying to get somebody into fishing and introduce them, there's nothing better than grab a couple dozen minnows and some jig heads and roll out on the lake and find a school of crappie or a brush pile.
That's it.
Yeah. And
100%.
just let them catch 300
or catfishing.
catfish. Like, it doesn't have to be. If somebody says take me fishing,
I'm not taking someone.
they probably don't care. Like, honestly, if they're like, hey, I want to go fishing, if they're like, hey, I want to go catch bass, that's different. But if somebody just asks you to go fishing, like, take them something where you're gonna catch fish, crappie,
Absolutely.
bluegill. Take them to a pond where you know is loaded with little bass, and they can throw a wacky rig and catch 3,000 of them. Like that. That's what gets people hooked. Because we've all said it as we start to wind down. Like, every single one of us has a memory of getting started. And for Ben and I don't vividly remember, but I know I caught a bunch of panfish because I've seen.
Oh
pictures.
yeah, 100%.
I was out catching fish, and that's what made it fun. My dad handing me that rod after hooking that bedfish, like, catching that fish is what hooked me on fishing. It was the catch that hooked me. And then as I got older and learned more, like, it was the challenge and figuring out behaviors and patterns, blah, 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 that kept you interested. It wasn't just going out. Because honestly, as fun as it is to catch fish, if I went out and caught 40 pounds every single time I was fishing, I don't know how much fun it would be. After a while, it would get old, right? Think about old hobbies you had, if you had any, like stuff that you enjoyed doing for a while, but it might have been like a very repetitive thing. Eventually, you start to do it less and less, and then it's just something that's in the closet or in the garage that you don't do anymore because it doesn't challenge you, or it's not something that interests you the way it did. With fishing, like, it's different every day. Sometimes it's different after 12 hours. One thing 12 hours ago doesn't work the next day.
Yeah.
You know, so, but yeah, if somebody asks you to go fishing, just take them fishing for fish that you know that they're going to catch. Let them get some fish. Let them catch some fish. Don't take them to Jordan Lake in July and August when the fish are deep and the schools are small and there's 500 other boats out there trying to catch them. Like,
I'll say this before I think two things, right? Trey, if you want to take us out here in a second, but one, that's okay if they are kind of a bass fisherman and like they want to learn a new technique, and like that's a different scenario than like a novice, right? Two, hopefully I didn't offend any cat fishermen out there when I said I'm not taking one catfish, because there's nothing wrong with it. And to be honest, like those guys who target like down in the Cape Fear, those 100-pound flatheads and all, like there is a real technique and knowing the spots and all that. I know nothing about that. I catch catfish when I'm bass fishing by accident.
Yep.
And the only other way I really know how to do is either a trot line or you just sit there and wait.
Yeah.
Right. And I want to be moving around and stuff. So, like in that scenario, I'm not going to be a good teacher because when I don't know, it's not super enjoyable. So, like with that, like also take people out when you have the most confidence to be able to do that.
Yes.
Right? Because it used to, when I was making the YouTube videos, I get hit up all the time and take them out. And to be honest, with the summertime Jordan fishing, right? For every video you see, there may be 4 or 5 days that there just wasn't enough footage for video. And, not being a guy, not having the confidence, right? I'm not going to have to take somebody out, right? Especially they were offering to pay, and I wouldn't do that because I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
Because like there is some movie magic involved. You're seeing the good stuff. You're not seeing the 8 hours of just driving around the lake, wasting gas, looking at a screen, So
yeah,
yeah,
it's not wasting gas. It's figuring out the puzzle pieces, but
sometimes it's wasting gas.
Yeah, sometimes it is. Guys, definitely go check out our last video with Matty Wong. I think you really like it. He talks about his journey and what got him into fishing. We wanted to share our experience with everybody and kind of our mindset. Take somebody fishing or get somebody back into fishing. And it doesn't have to be bass fishing. Just get them in the outdoors. And for all the crap that we give the wakeboarders and the jet skiers and all those people that are out there on their pontoon boats and yachts, you know what? They're also probably doing it to escape from other things and get that good mindset back. So it's important for everybody to enjoy what God's created for us. And we appreciate all of you following along. Like I said, leave us a review and please share the show with your friends if you like this kind of thing. And Ben, Pete, got anything else?
Yeah, just real quick, like Trey said, if you can leave us a review, follow, whatever it is on the platform you do, it really helps us continue to grow. We keep growing, and that helps us move up in the algorithm, because even with podcasts, there's an algorithm and there's certain metrics that help get you out there in front of folks. So reviews are big. September 1st, we got an announcement coming. We'll keep teasing that. Looking forward to bringing you an opportunity to get some gear and support an awesome company. And I think that's about all that I have.
Ben, you good?
Good.
All right, guys, take someone fishing, get them back into fishing, and let's create a culture of anglers helping anglers. one cast at a time.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh God, it's a toad, son. It's a fucking toad, dude.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.